Well, now you got into this mess by going down a waterfall. Now, how would you suppose we can get them out of there?
By going up the waterfall?
That's right. Anything's possible in Disneyland.
Welcome, friends, and thank you for joining us on this episode of Up the Waterfall with your hosts, Zanna and Scott Otis.
Hello.
This week is episode 39, The History of Fort Wilderness.
Fun.
I think it's going to be a fun one. We've actually been researching for a week on this, and I think it will prove very informative for those that may not have been aware of the history of Fort Wilderness.
In a way, we've been researching our whole lives.
That's true.
Because we've both been there a long time ago.
Well, what's funny is, up until I met you, I really didn't go there that often.
Wow.
When I was little and we visited, I went to river country all the time.
That's
but my
good
parents
enough.
were not big on buffeteria kind of places.
A Disney invention.
I don't think I ever went to Le Cellier when it was a buffeteria.
I also did not.
I'm trying to think of other, which is weird because there were times, just not at Disney, when we would. Like there was Morrison's Cafeteria. I don't know if I don't think they're in business anymore, but
I do not know Morrison's.
It was like an old South thing, and we would go there all the time when we lived in Ocala.
Yummy.
Anyway, so as a result, I don't even know if I went to Hoop-Dee-Doo with my parents. We must have at some point, but if we did, it was only like a one-time thing.
Yeah, we did it one time, and that was literally our only time doing like what would be considered a full-service restaurant.
And then we went as part of my mom's panel training group. So that was actually, I think I went one other time before that with friends. And that's when I was reintroduced to it. And
I know we went pretty early on.
Yeah, I don't know if you were there that night that I'm talking about with friends.
I'm not sure.
And then once, we became a thing, we kind of explored Fort Wilderness a lot more, and you showed me things that I didn't know or had forgotten about, and we rediscovered, or for me, discovered the joys of Trail's End. May it rest in peace right now. It's taking a break.
Not just Trail's End, though, but like literally all of
Yeah, I'm starting with
Fort
food because I
Wilderness.
guess I'm hungry right now. It's before
I could
dinner
go to
time.
Trail's End right now.
We even had our, not that it was actually a rehearsal, but we had technically our rehearsal dinner at Trail's End.
It's
We've
a
had
favorite of ours.
Many birthday celebrations there. But we're going to go way back.
Oh, my.
To 1971.
That's when Walt Disney World opened.
You were born, and I was not.
I mean, I wasn't born in that year, but I was already born.
Right, you were already alive. And, I recently shared on Twitter and Facebook, I think, a post I wrote back in 2014.
Oh, my gosh. If any of you are listening to this, you should absolutely stop what you're doing and read this post. You're a great writer.
Oh, thanks.
And this is one of your good ones. Like
every time
really
I
good ones.
reread something like this, I'm like, wow, I forgot I wrote that.
Because sometimes you just...
I really do
get
black
the
out
urge
after
and you
I
just-
write something
You write
from my heart. I completely black out.
literally from your heart.
So this was written right after we had experienced the 40th anniversary of Hoop-Dee-Doo. Which I had covered. Disney invited us out to that, and I think I just posted about it on Instagram at the time because I think that was in the time frame where I wasn't really blogging as much anymore.
Was that the 40th anniversary of Fort Wilderness or the Hoop-Dee-Doo?
I think it was Hoop-Dee-Doo.
Okay, so there you go.
Which would have been
2014.
2014, yeah.
Yep.
So I had wanted to write about this when we had done one of our walks around Fort Wilderness because you were talking about the Marshmallow Marsh, which I had no knowledge of. And I believe there had been like a little bridge to get to it because it was across a little, whatever that's called, like
one of the canals.
Yeah, canal, that's it. Yeah. And so you were showing me, they had just taken the bridge away semi-recently, and you were showing me where it used to be, and then we were going on trails around there.
I think the bridge was still there. They just they locked it. They blocked it off.
I think it's gone now. Like they totally got rid of it. But I could be wrong. It's been a while since we've been over there. So we had done a huge walk around, going over to where River Country used to be and all of that fun stuff. And really, you get lost because I'm sure many people listening have been to Fort Wilderness, have been to Trails End or Hoop-Dee-Doo, have maybe even driven around during the holidays to see, rented a golf cart to see the decorations that the campsites do, because they do go all out, and that's a whole thing in and of itself. But separate from all of that stuff, just the grounds themselves are like pure, unadulterated Florida.
Oh, yeah.
Florida wilderness.
I've always called it the last bastion of old Walt Disney World.
Yeah. And, the cypress trees and the little knees from cypress trees and the swampy areas. And the trees are, relatively tall by Florida standards. So you hear birds and you see squirrels.
And the Spanish moss hanging off the oak trees. Oh, yeah.
It's a whole other experience, and it really takes you away. And that's what the blog post is about, really, is that take the Fast Pass and the My Magic Plus and my Disney experience and all of that stuff and just forget about it and explore Fort Wilderness. Yeah. And you will be transported to 1971.
Yeah, a whole different time and place.
Not much has changed. Some things have gone away, but the grounds themselves are very similar, and you really think about what it was like. And we talked about this, I think just in the recap show last week for the anniversary, how Disney World, when it opened, was a whole different experience. Oh, yeah. And I mentioned this in the blog post as well. Seeing the Polynesian resort and the tiki birds and things like that. And Florida in and of itself was another destination back then. And people that lived, up the northeast coast and things like that didn't experience this kind of thing all the time. So it really was a draw just to experience Florida, and not necessarily like Daytona Beach and the beaches, but like real Florida wilderness. You mean
things like Weeki Wachee and Silver Springs?
Yeah.
And
I mean, before Disney World, that's what people would come to Florida to see tourist-wise, was those kind
Cypress
of
Gardens.
Things.
What's weird, as a family, when we came down, starting in the mid-'80s, we only did Walt Disney World. We stayed on US 192 in one of those little hotels, but we didn't do anything. Like, we never went to Gatorland or SeaWorld.
Well, I'm sure for you. Well, how long did you stay? Like a week?
Oh, yeah, a week plus.
Wow.
Between 1 and 2 weeks. And, yeah, it was all Walt Disney World. So we would, get the 5-day pass for the 2 parks, Epcot Center and the Magic Kingdom, and basically do open to close on all 5 of those days. There would be one day where we go to the Village Marketplace, and just that which is a whole nother relaxing day, and then another day where we would go to River Country and Discovery Island, and then we didn't really explore all of Fort Wilderness when we did that, but just taking the bus over, you got to experience that, and we walked through the petting farms and all that.
I'd forgotten they had that until I was doing this research.
But it was a whole another day of, and honestly, I wish back then I had known everything I do now about Fort Wilderness, because I would have done a lot more than just River Country and Discovery Island, which alone, those are fantastic. But there's so much more.
It's true, and it really was. You guys probably had the knowledge of Disneyland because you grew up there. So you knew, like, we're just going to stay at Disney and not try our hand at these weird Gatorland things and stuff like that. For us, we were coming down from Massachusetts, and most of the time we booked a package that like included, medieval times or King Henry's Feast. I remember existed the other day.
It's funny that those things existed because, they were packaged with basically non-Disney things.
And it really was a time before Disney had so much to do that you didn't need to leave to do anything else. When it first opened, there was definitely enough for people to visit and do, because people did things like take a day and play golf and play tennis and relax and go shopping. And it wasn't like a constant run to the next ride thing. Like,
and that's why those days, like when we went to the village marketplace or even the, river country, that was fantastic.
Yeah.
And it was just, and if you think
didn't
about it,
feel
river
like,
country was
I
so
need to get back to
small.
the parks. It was like, it was good on its own, at least for me.
But I mean, we didn't have that frenzied pace.
Right.
And that was the appeal.
I know. The good old days. So yeah, when the park was being created before Walt Disney passed, he did say early in his vision that he wanted people to come and visit his Florida project and have the option of staying in everything from a sleeping bag to a luxury suite. So he wanted everyone to experience the visit the way they wanted to, and that meant different things for different people. And certainly Disney has continued in that to this day.
I'm sure for someone it was a sleeping bag in a luxury suite, but I think the sleeping bag was, his idea for Fort Wilderness, because it was known that Walt Disney was a fan of the great outdoors. Right. A lot of his original Disney movies took place there.
Right.
He himself visited many national parks, like he honeymooned at Mount Rainier.
That's a good topic for a book.
Oh yeah. Plus, he been to Yosemite and lots of others. We've already talked about the whole history of the Grand Canyon and all of that. But basically, being a huge fan of the outdoors, and a lot of the movie's theme being kind of outdoorsy, especially like things like Davy Crockett. Yeah. Which we'll talk about later. It comes to reason that not only that was part of the inspiration for Fort Wilderness, but also just the natural beauty that they were building into. Right. Because when they started, it was literally just a bunch of swamplands, some lakes, and they noticed that Florida is beautiful, very swampy, but they can craft it into however they want. And that's why they came up with all those canals. Mm-hmm. And, Bay Lake was already there, but they made Seven Seas Lagoon. All gators and cypress trees and all of that
all sorts of critters were back there.
That's kind of what played into that.
Yeah. So Card Walker, who of course was the executive vice president at the time, chief operating officer, supposedly asked Dick Nunis a few months before everything was supposed to be open, like, what about that campground?
Remember that campground?
And Dick said, what campground? And so they realized, we need to work on that, because that was part of the original project. But of course, building the other resorts that they were working on were
Polynesian and Contemporary, and those were kind of they were getting a little bit behind schedule. Yeah. And they had the opening day set of October 1st, 1971, and those were falling behind. So resources were being shifted to those. So leaving the campground kind of in a lurch.
Yes. So Dick Nunis called on Keith Camback, which I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. I don't know how else you would.
Good old Keith Camback.
Who was actually a Disneyland employee with a degree in recreation, whatever that means.
Yeah, I think he was in charge of the recreation of the other hotels.
Interesting. And he had no experience in campgrounds, but that's what they wanted. They didn't want someone that was like, this is how we have to do it, because that's how everyone else does it. Dick Nunis wanted Keith to go out, and he sent him out on a 6-month tour around the country to see other campgrounds.
Can you imagine being sent out for 6 months?
I can. It reminds me of Mad Men, which is why I love that show. Right. And I wish that someone would make one for the creation of Disneyland and Disney World, because I think it would be amazing.
Oh my God, that would be fantastic. But yeah, that would be a great way, and that was a great way for him to essentially go around and get best practices at all
They
of
didn't
the
want
places
to follow industry standard. They wanted to take the best of everything and make that work for Walt Disney World. So he also did environmental classes, which really was ahead of its time, I think.
Oh, yeah.
So that he knew to develop the philosophy that the campground should be built to accentuate the land's natural beauty, which is what you just mentioned as well. So I think it really worked out well. If you see original, you can look on YouTube and find like original commercials and promos for, Walt Disney World and Fort Wilderness. It's funny to see the original like campsite hookups, and there's almost no trees around them. They're there, but they're just not as tall as we're used to seeing them today.
It's certainly grown up a lot more.
Yeah, but everything was done with, a reason and a pattern in mind for what it was going to look like in the future. So a funny story about Keith Camback.
Ooh.
Because the other resorts that we mentioned were behind schedule, it was very difficult for Keith to get any supplies, materials, tools, or anything to help them work on the campsites and the campground in general.
What did he do?
So he sent his men out after hours on boats to go to the other resort sites and get what they could get.
Kind of do a little requisition project.
Yes. And there was other times when I think he found out that the legal department had no problem getting anything they needed. So he went in and raided their department for like desks and things like that. So that earned his employees the nickname Camback's Raiders. So yeah.
Yeah.
That was a fun backstory that you may not have realized was going on. And it didn't open the same day as the rest of Walt Disney World opened. It was a month later.
Yeah, November, 19th?
19th of 1971.
I think also when he was doing that raiding, to really fully envelop himself in the project, he actually moved there. And he lived in a trailer on site.
Wow.
Right there at Fort Wilderness, not only to be there all the time to get everything done, but also just to kind of live that whole campground lifestyle.
Definitely would make him be in the mood for that.
Yeah.
As we know, Fort Wilderness itself was almost immediately a hit because of the rustic appeal, and it had, air-conditioned comfort stations and things like that. So they weren't throwing you out into the middle of the woods and the swamp.
Yeah, back then they didn't have the fancy RVs and things like we do now. With all, you can live there pretty nicely if you've got one of them fancy things. But basically, a lot of people would either pitch a tent or they would have like a more rustic style RV that didn't necessarily have like a full shower or, as you said, air conditioning. So things like that were very nice.
When it opened, they actually had only 232 campsites and 2 comfort stations when it first opened.
Got a lot more now.
It expanded in 1973, adding more campsites and also 10 Airstream trailers. So you could actually rent a trailer there.
Oh, that's awesome.
And I printed out this brochure, which I don't know what year it's from, but it actually is sponsored by compliments of Fleetwood manufacturer, the official travel trailers of Fort Wilderness.
That's right.
And they have on the back here 5 different campers that you could rent on site, which you can't anymore, but there's a million places you can
there are
rent things now.
Things now that will do it all for you.
But yeah, I mean, this really, it's such a, and there's some great photos in here too.
Oh, I love, the old
we'll
photos.
We'll share some of those on the blog
are
post.
Fantastic. I was going to say, I forgot this, the old Story of Walt Disney World guide, the commemorative edition. On their back, this is a bad version, but there are so many old photos of, Fort Wilderness campground living. People riding in canoes, people hiking in the woods, horseback riding. And
what's funny is, I saw on actually Imaginerding, our friend George Taylor.
Oh, yes.
He had found a strange little promotional item that was basically like a 7-day diary of staying at Fort Wilderness.
Oh yeah.
It was done by Disney. It wasn't like a real diary. It was very planned out and stuff like that. And basically it was pretty funny because they showed that it was only, I think, 3 days they were staying there before they even went to the Magic Kingdom. And there was
sounds about right.
So much to do that they talked about with, of course, all of the different activities, archery and horseback riding and canoe things, kayaks.
Yeah.
And
swimming.
Of course, Marshmallow Marsh was a part of that.
Oh my gosh.
Which you can speak to.
Yeah,
I mentioned it
Marshmallow
in the
Marsh.
blog post, but
you know,
only from your
currently,
words.
as of now, they have they've developed a large area where they have a campfire where you can roast s'mores, marshmallows, and all that, and then they do a sing along and show a Disney film. But before that, there was a thing called Marshmallow Marsh, and this was actually a paid ticket kind of thing where you would meet at Pioneer Hall, and you basically take a hike through the woods, along the beach at some in some portions, and then kind of go off to an area that's completely away from all of the campground areas.
Would they canoe to get there? I thought?
That's right.
That's what you told me. I wrote it in the blog post.
They hiked to the place where you get the canoe, because the canoe parts were not in the it was not in Bay Lake. It was in the canals.
Oh, okay.
Sorry. But then they would canoe
and sing old Americana songs.
Exactly. And they would get to a place that is alongside Bay Lake, and then at that place they would have a campfire all set up, and you basically sit around in a circle, sing more,
make
songs.
S'mores.
Yeah, make s'mores. But also, and then there was a nature hike right alongside there as well that goes alongside portions of Bay Lake. But since this took place at night, they didn't do that part.
They did do then have a viewing of the electrical water pageant.
That's right.
Which had a perfect view where they were.
Yeah, because the electrical water pageant was just a totally really cool thing, similar to the Main Street Electrical Parade, but on water. Exactly. And since they had all of their hotels and things on either Seven Seas Lagoon or Bay Lake, they were able to take it around and basically kind of have a show for each one of those locations.
That's one of my favorite things to do is when we happen to be driving and time it just right, and we go under the water bridge, which is, of course, what connects Seven Seas Lagoon to Bay Lake. And it's basically a bridge that has water on top of it.
Which is literally a very unique thing.
Yes, it's an architectural engineering feat.
That's right.
And there's times when they're going from the Seven Seas Lagoon portion over to the Fort Wilderness and Wilderness Lodge viewing, which you can't really see it from Wilderness Lodge, can you?
Oh, no, they do a showing for the folks at Wilderness Lodge.
It's been a while since I've stayed there.
Absolutely.
So you can just be driving underneath and the floats are going above you, and it's a really cool moment.
But then also from there, I think you could see the fireworks, the Magic Kingdom fireworks from there
I
as
forgot those existed.
Yeah. So it was really just a great time.
Another thing that they offered back then, and there's not much information on this, but this was in that 7-day diary thing, was a thing called a Wilderness Night Wildlife Excursion.
Oh, wow.
And it was a nighttime tour each evening at 8:30 p.m. for 2 hours.
That's awesome.
It was only $3 a person, which is crazy.
Back then, the prices of things.
And everyone would don kind of like a miner's cap or hat with a light and explore the Fort Wilderness grounds and like whatever critters they came upon.
Looking for wildlife and deer and things.
In the art, like the little promotional thing they did, they said, we even saw the red eyes of an alligator. And I was like, I mean, I guess it was possible back then.
Yeah, because you'd walk alongside the canals. You wouldn't go in them because of the crocodiles. Or, I'm sorry, alligators. But, they're there.
That was a fun thing. And the other activities, I mentioned some of them: horseback riding, archery, volleyball, tetherball, which the tetherball is still there, guys.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
It's so funny.
That's a huge thing.
Horseshoes, which you can always play while waiting for Trail's End, but now they've added hula hoops, so it's not as exciting. Croquet, swimming, fishing, hiking, bicycling, and canoeing.
Yeah.
So that's crazy.
Yeah, you can renting a bike there is just awesome. I've actually taken our bikes out there and ridden through the paths. Yes. It's a great place to do that.
I'm going to speak a bit about things that were planned to be added to Fort Wilderness and never came to be.
Oh, no.
And then you can talk about Hoop-Dee-Doo if you want.
Hoop-Dee-Who?
That.
All right.
So the original plans, as many of you Disney history buffs know, called for an additional 3 resorts to be added around the lagoon, which was going to be the Asian, the Venetian, and the Persian hotels.
Right.
And those, as you know, never came to be. One of them eventually turned into the Grand Floridian, of course, and one of them became Wilderness Lodge, but we'll get there in a second. By the turn of the decade, these had not happened. And so this had a lot to do with Card Walker and his cautious nature, because, of course, this was happening during the gas crisis. So things were very expensive. And I guess at the time, a lot of hotels had, of course, sprung up on 192 and Kissimmee and all that, but they were going bankrupt because of the gas crisis, and they couldn't pay off their construction loans. So Card, being a smart guy, was like, I'm not going to risk it. Let's just wait a bit and see. So he did not build anything, but they had suggested something in, I think, around 74, right after like Hoop-Dee-Doo had been open for a while. Wow, there's a cat meowing somewhere. That they wanted to build something called Cypress Point Lodge.
Ooh.
And by 1980, this was in the model that appeared outside of, in the Magic Kingdom where the Walt Disney story was and all that fun stuff.
Love that.
Which I wish I had more photos of, because I definitely spent a lot of time looking at
That where
it.
Hoot Gibson the owl was?
I don't know.
Yes.
I've blocked it all
I'll
out.
just say yes.
Okay. So this was something I read on good old Michael Crawford's Progress City USA.
Yes. Our friend Michael.
So that they talked about it, but then it disappeared, all mention of it, after 1983. But what it was supposed to be was a medium-sized hotel facility located on the south shore of Bay Lake near Fort Wilderness Campground Resort. So basically in between Fort Wilderness and Contemporary. It was going to have 550 rooms and 50 log cabins on the beach. Cypress Point Lodge will offer a romantic notion of a turn-of-the-century hunting lodge secluded in a deep forest. Neither the trees nor the building will dominate the entire area, but blend together in a natural harmony. One can almost hear the crackling fireplace and feel the large wooden beams offer a haven of security and comfort. Cypress Point Lodge will also include 2 restaurants, a pool, extensive beach, and a lake dock. Guests will commute in and out of Cypress Point by watercraft. So there was no plans to connect the monorail, and everyone was okay with that. That was in, I believe, like in Eyes and Ears.
Yeah. I mean, that sounds like pretty much where Wilderness Lodge is now.
Yeah, so it sounds interesting that they had talked about those cabins on the beach.
Which now have come to pass.
Yeah, so Cypress Point never came to be, and then later in the 90s, you may have heard more about this, because this was
the
more
one
popular.
I remember.
Buffalo Junction was a thing, and that was because of Disneyland Paris, or at the time Euro Disney, having the Hotel Cheyenne.
I've been there. It's very unique.
Is it?
Yes.
And they also had that Buffalo Bill's Wild West show there.
Yeah, got that there too. Yep.
So they kind of wanted to recreate that here, because we already had the Fort Wilderness set up. Yep. But it was going to be similar to that Hotel Cheyenne, resemble the street of a western town in the late 19th century, providing a thematic link between the early frontier theme of Fort Wilderness and the early 20th century national park theme of Wilderness Lodge.
Yeah. So this would have been in the land right between the two.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And it would combine lodging with dining venues, shops, and entertainment, and include a version of the Buffalo Bill Wild West show.
That's awesome.
And then that also never came to be, but Wilderness Lodge did come to be, and already was like, in existence at that point. And then years and years later, we got the cabins when they had discovered timeshare things and all sorts of fun stuff.
Yeah, I mean, they recently announced this, the Lakeside Retreat, which
Reflections.
Which was, I think, supposed to be on the same land that, Buffalo Junction was slated for, but it never sounded as kind of westerny.
No, they definitely were
Buffalo
going
Junction
with
was.
like a more communing with nature kind of
But
thing.
in a modern way, I
yes,
think, right?
modern and sleek, I believe. But they were gonna, they were throwing Pocahontas on their promotional pieces with it.
Oh,
So
I did not know that.
I think it was going to perhaps have that sort of theme. And now it's kind of up in the air and on hold.
Yeah.
However, in the meantime, they have destroyed all of river country once and for all, which of course was sitting and deteriorating for decades. Had many a good time at river country.
River country was awesome. I mean, we might as well just talk about that for a little bit. But yeah, that was basically, the first themed water park in the world.
Yes.
And Disney decided not just to have a swimming pool, but basically model it after the old swimming hole, kind of like from like Mark Twain's youth, or even kind of from the books of him, from like about Huck Finn and Tom Sawyer, that kind of thing. And it was literally right off of Bay Lake, and the old swimming hole was essentially using the waters of Bay Lake. It was filtered, but it was still natural lake water. Sand bottom.
Yeah, it was green.
Yeah, it was not the pretty blue. They did also have a giant, chlorinated swimming pool as well. But this was essentially swimming in a lake.
I never went down those 2 slides that went into the.
What?
They were too high up in the air for me, a small child.
Yeah,
I was little.
Yeah, I mean, and here's the thing: there were 2, as you mentioned, 2 water slides. The slip and slide and water slides, as well as the tube ride.
Yes, I did. I mean, I did the tube ride all day.
But if you think about what they have now at Typhoon Lagoon and Blizzard Beach with so many different kinds of things, they had here those 2 water slides and the tube ride, and of course, lots of activities.
Traditional
as well.
water slides too, though. That I think there was 1 or 2 next to the tube thing.
Yeah, those are the 2 water slides I'm talking
about. No, I went on those. I'm talking about the ones that were in the chlorinated pool that were like up high, and you just like if you went to look at and do some urban exploring and ever looked at river country before they took it all down, those were the 2 slides you could see.
I thought you were talking about the
No. I did
slides.
those.
Okay.
I was a champion of
what
those.
you're talking about, yes, is into the chlorinated pool. You would go up essentially to like the second floor,
10 feet,
and it would just be basically a drop down. But then the slide would end maybe 7 feet above the water.
It seemed really high for me, and I couldn't I still to this day hold my nose if I jump in a pool or do a water slide. So yeah, it was not appealing to me. I was scared.
Yeah, it was basically a goal to be able to graduate to be able to do that.
I'm sure it was, you boys all did that.
Oh yeah.
But the tubing thing I loved so very much, even though like some of the stone, because it was like made out of carved stone kind of material. And I definitely got scuffed up in there, because you would get stuck on things. Sometimes it would there was a little whirlpool action and you couldn't get over the little hill. But I loved it. And I was never scared or worried of getting stuck up there. And the regular water slides, at the time that we visited a lot back then, I lived in Ocala, and they had
Whoop and Holler,
They had Wild Waters, which was right next to Silver Springs. Everybody get your raft and get in the water. It's time for another Wild Waters wave. That's how their wave pool thing started. Any Ocala listeners will know what I'm talking about. At least my mother might. And, that was back in the time period where I would get dropped off there, just like you got dropped off at Disneyland.
That's right.
I would get dropped off at Wild Waters and spend the day there with no sunscreen.
Yikes.
And
ouch.
Just go on water slides.
Yeah.
And I loved doing that, but now I'm not a fan of water slides because they've changed them, and they're so technologically advanced, and they put you in the dark, and I don't like being in the dark, and I don't like going backwards and not knowing where I'm going out, because as I mentioned, I still have to hold my nose when I go underwater.
But that's what made the other thing really cool, the tubing thing.
Yes.
And what I loved about it is that you would queue up in kind of a line that went through the lake. And so while you're waiting for your tube, you're actually wading in the water.
Yeah, it's crazy.
And if you were if it was especially hot, you'd kind of sit down and kind of scooch along so that you would be fully underwater. And eventually you'd get to be where you would get to the tube. And the tubes were all black.
Yes.
Completely, like, all of the ones over at Blizzard Beach and all, they're all themed now, and they've got these fancy designs. These were literally just like rubber tubes.
Yeah.
Black rubber tubes. And what was weird is they had all different kinds of shapes and sizes. It was not standard.
I don't remember that part.
And then you'd get one, and then you'd climb the fancy stairs all the way to the top with your tube, and then plop it down in the water and kind of go along.
Yeah.
And there were always these like eddies and currents and things where you would get stuck.
Yeah, that's what I just said.
And I loved that.
It was fun.
Sometimes I would just say, I'm not even going to like swim to the next part where you go down.
Yeah, you could just hang out.
And you just hang out and essentially
until someone
ride it
bumped into you, and then
for
you
like
had
30
to move
minutes.
on. They also had those kind of things where you could like hold over the top, like little mini zip line sort of things, and like stepping on, similar to what Blizzard Beach has now, but it's like all chlorinated. But it was over the lake.
Yeah, and then they also had like water volleyball.
Oh yeah,
and things like that.
And they had a beach. Like it was all on a beach.
Not just that, but they also had a nature walk in the trees. It basically went all the way up to Bay Lake on a boardwalk, and you could see all kinds of wildlife.
Yeah.
It's kind of like a mini version of Discovery Island there.
I definitely remember that's where we used to see peacocks. There used to be tons of peacocks in Fort Wilderness, even up to like maybe 15 years ago. They were still there, and you would hear them meowing. That's what they sound like. But now you don't really see the peacocks anymore.
But like, if you think about it, everything that we've been describing so far is so completely different than anything else at Walt Disney World. It's so outdoorsy and old-fashioned and that kind of thing. It's just fantastic. And I think
because River Country was compact, it wasn't like, when I think about going to the water parks, which when I get there, they're enjoyable, but they're kind of like overwhelming to me.
Because there's so much
personally,
now.
I know everyone loves them, but yeah, there's just like so much to do, and they're so crowded also, or they were, that you're always waiting in lines and all that stuff. So this was a quaint little thing, which, attendance was much less than it is.
It was
these
a simpler
days.
time, simpler
thing,
but it was just as enjoyable, if not more so.
Yeah.
So
good times.
So anyway, I will now get to the Hoop-Dee-Doo.
Yeah, let's talk about the food things. I mean, the show.
Well, yeah, it's a show. It's a food and a show. So originally they had, when Fort Wilderness was built, they had built Pioneer Hall there, which was essentially like just kind of like a recreation hall where they would show movies, where you would kind of like take your food from the Crockett's Tavern and just eat, or basically you would play games or just hang out. And it was actually filled completely with memorabilia about Davy Crockett, which is really cool because that's one of Disney's great motion pictures from the 50s. And of course, he's a legend. But they had that, but they wanted something. They wanted, Card Walker wanted a show there to be able to produce some money. So they came up with the Hoop-Dee-Doo musical review. And they did it very quickly. All within, this is like late 73, early 74. And they didn't have people like stars for these shows.
Yeah.
They had developed, 6 parts, and think about these names: Johnny Ringo, 6-Bit Slocum, Jim Handy, Dolly Drew, Flora Long, and Claire de Lune. Those crazy characters.
Yes.
Kind of like 3 couples. But yeah, they there was actually like a program from the Cal Arts in California where there would be like a kind of like a work.
Oh yeah, they were college kids when they started.
College kids.
Yeah.
But like coming over to Disney World to do like a work thing. As part of credits for their classes.
An internship, perhaps?
Like that, yes. And they kind of just chose them as to be the stars, even though they're only here for like the summer. And they basically picked amongst them as part of, they're actually part of the All-American Comedy Workshop there. and they were cast in these parts, and they essentially just made up this show.
Yeah, it was all written by, you know, cast members for the most part.
What's funny is, not funny, but amazing, is that show that they came up with and that opened in 1974 is pretty much exactly the way it is now.
It is exactly the same. The only thing that has changed, well, besides the Hoop-Dee-Doo song. Sadly, that is no more due to copyright issues. I don't know.
Yeah.
When they do the thing with the napkin, originally people would stand on their chairs and swing the red and white checkered napkins around. And obviously, due to liability issues, Disney was like, let's not do that anymore.
I always wondered why they did that, because, you know, you're using these napkins.
I know, you get your crumbs all over the place.
Yeah, so as soon as you're starting to whip these things around, I would think all of the chicken bones and things
hopefully
like that,
you're not
cornbread would go flying around.
chicken bones in your napkin. They do give you a bucket for that.
That is true. But anyway, yeah, so they developed the show with a lot of great songs, including the Hoop-Dee-Doo song, which sadly is no more.
Yes.
Which was
Thanks,
actually...
Perry Como.
It wasn't Perry... Well, Perry Como did actually do a cover of... Or not cover. He actually did original song way back in the 50s of the Hoop-Dee-Doo song. But I guess, yeah, it was the guy who wrote it for him that eventually said, hey... And they had to come up with a different one. But they had another song for the introduction of the dessert, strawberry shortcake.
Which we talked about at some point. I don't know what the topic of our thing was.
Oh,
the snacks. Mm-hmm. It was the iconic snacks. And that was one of your mentions.
Right. And then there's the all-state song, which kind of is set to the tune of She'll Be Coming Around the Mountain, which they had a verse for every state in the nation, as well as a lot of the famous
that's always
countries
fun.
That people could be potentially from. Mm-hmm. So the stars would go around and kind of mix and mingle and figure out what states people were visiting from, and then eventually they would do that song to the tune of She'll Be Coming Around the Mountain, and with a different one for each state.
I think part of what makes Hoop-Dee-Doo so endearing and beloved by all is that it's like, I personally am not a fan of like audience participation things. Like, right. I don't want to be involved. Please just leave me alone and let me eat my whatever.
Here.
But at Hoop-Dee-Doo, you don't feel that way because it's not anything sinister. It's not like off humor or anything. It's really good-natured, and you really grow to love the characters themselves.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Kudos to the character development, because you instantly know who everyone is, what their role is, and you want to hear more and be a part of it.
Like, will they finally, fall in love at the end? Like, there's a couple of character arcs where, like, will they or won't they fall in love, or they're just kind of hamming it up too much.
Yeah, it really is great.
And of course, also there's the Ballad of Davy Crockett that they do there,
which ties in all of the theming.
That's right. And then on this one, they actually pick 4 people from the audience to go up on stage and do the story of Davy Crockett. I wasn't personally picked, but Alex was in one of the.
Did he have to wear a tutu?
He wasn't the tutu one. He was the guy who, why did Davy Crockett have to die?
I've never been chosen either, and I'm okay with that.
Yeah, but no, it's absolutely fun, and
it really is
an amazing thing.
And the food is great too. Yeah. It's not like you're getting subpar food because
all you can
it's a
eat
show.
Chicken and ribs.
And they do
baked
have
beans, cornbread,
vegetarian options, probably vegan at this point too. I haven't been since then. Just saying.
Fried chicken.
Yeah.
And then of course it ends with the strawberry shortcake, which actually originally was apple pie.
Wow, that makes sense. Apple pie is, America's favorite.
That's right, but I don't know if they they probably didn't do the strawberry shortcake song for when
that
they had apple pie.
That would be a little confusing if they did. Yes.
What's great about that song, though, the strawberry shortcake, is that your servers are actually part of that, and they're actually on stage dancing.
And then you get to cheer for your server when you see them.
That's right. Because they do a little dance routine up there on stage.
Yeah.
And then they come serve you your strawberry shortcake. So if you haven't gone to Hoop-Dee-Doo, you absolutely must.
Yes.
It is phenomenal.
And of course, Trail's End, we mentioned a little bit about.
Oh my gosh.
So good.
Love Trails.
Hopefully it can return in some form
Please.
soon.
I want the chili.
We mentioned in the live show that they're, opening Hollywood and Vine soon, I think next month, maybe the end of this month.
Oh, that's right.
So it's going to be a family style thing, apparently. We weren't sure when we reported that,
that's
but
right.
Yeah.
The kind of thing that they used to do at
it would make sense that they could do that
Wilderness
at
Lodge.
Trails End, like a giant skillet kind of situation.
Or you can still ask for more.
Yeah.
Yes, please.
Just the atmosphere there, though. Like, it smells like old wood, the pine
Well, that's another
logs
thing.
that are in there. And
I forgot to mention that this Pioneer Hall was, of course, a recreation of a sturdy, kind of like a lodge from the old Northwest Territory.
Mm-hmm.
It was actually assembled from 1,283 hand-fitted logs that they found just the perfect logs in Montana.
They needed to find tall enough ones.
They were western white pine trees that they were shipped to Florida and then basically put together to create
Amazing.
Pioneer Hall. Yeah.
Amazing workmanship and craftsmanship.
Oh yeah, you should check it out.
And yeah, I really hope Trails End comes back, and it's just you instantly feel like at home, whether you're a local that's going there all the time like we do, or you're a camper or a cabin goer that comes every year. I mean, there's people that rent campsites for 6 months at a time, and then they have to leave so that they can come back. Otherwise they're like living like residents.
But and they have their exclusive like campsite that they reserve months and months in advance,
and
so they
if
can be right there.
Ever walked or taken a golf cart through, you can see that there's special Mickey ear lamps that people make. There's like signs with their name on them, and people really do go all out during the holidays of Halloween and Christmas.
Absolutely.
It's part of our holiday tradition. I don't know what's going to happen this year when we can't do that. If people is it open right now or no?
I don't think it is.
I don't think it is at all.
Which is sad.
I think the P&J's takeout is open though. So maybe the cabins are open, but not the campsites.
I do not know.
And it's like reduced number.
We have not been out much.
Not sure, but hopefully it will return to its former glory. And please never destroy Fort Wilderness, because it truly is.
That's the thing we were saying. This is
a unique.
This is old school Walt Disney World, and also old school Florida.
Yeah. Which is, strange, because it's not really like none of the buildings and none of the even Hoop-Dee-Doo or anything are like Florida specific. It's just like wildernessy and old Southern to a point in Hoop-Dee-Doo. So, but it's a favorite of all of us in this house.
I actually stayed there.
That's right.
Literally the day after my high school graduation, I hopped in a car from Texas and drove to Florida and stayed at Fort Wilderness. I was going to camp in a tent. This was in, late May or early June. Can't remember exactly when I graduated. I guess it was May.
Probably May.
I stayed one night in the tent, and wait a minute, that's way too hot.
No central air in that tent.
No, there wasn't. So I ended up sleeping in my car the rest of the time. But it was just the whole idea of being at Fort Wilderness, taking the buses around to the loops. I think, actually, I stayed in Bobcat Bend.
That's the other thing. We didn't even talk about the fun names of the different areas.
Many great names. There's Spanish Moss Lane, Settlers Bend, Moccasin Trail, Raccoon Lane, Jack Rabbit Run. That's one of my favorites.
It's very confusing if you
Sage Way.
are driving a golf cart through to look at decorations. Thank goodness you're the one that's driving, because I never know where I'm going.
Some of them are loops within loops, which I think is fun.
And we didn't even talk about the fact that, they also have the Chippendales Campfire Sing-Along over there.
Well, I mentioned that as kind of like the precursor to what to to what is now what Marshmallow Marsh used to be.
Yes, that's true.
They have that there.
That's where they show the movies, and there's sing-alongs,
Yes.
and you can buy s'mores
Actually,
products or
if you
bring
think
your
about
own.
it, pretty much all the resorts now have a thing where they kind of show
Movies under the
under the
stars.
stars. And there's even a website with a schedule and all that. But that started
Yeah.
at Fort Wilderness.
And they have the cool Dock Terminus little
Oh, that's right.
covered wagon
Where
there
you can
theming.
rent, if you don't have your own s'mores kit, you
Yes.
could essentially buy one.
Mm-hmm.
But
And
you
Chip
could
and
also
Dale are
bring your
there.
own.
To say hello.
Oh, yeah.
And they have multiple fire pits, I believe.
Yeah. They do not use Chip and Dale as firewood, though.
They do not.
That would not be good.
Also, there used to be Mickey's Backyard Barbecue, which sadly is no more.
Yeah.
Which was kind of like Hoop-Dee-Doo, but with outside.
Hoop-Dee-Doo light. It didn't have the huge show.
Yeah, it was
with
just
all
more
the,
like
But
singing.
they did
and-
have the characters there.
Yeah.
And there was a huge barn just really right behind Pioneer Hall as a kind of like a big all-you-can-eat location.
Yeah, it was just a covered
Yeah.
place with tables inside.
But
and
they did have a band there as well that
Yes.
played music, keep y'all entertained.
and that
and
was
fed.
still there up until they started construction on
Yeah.
the Reflections and had to close that down when they relocated the Tri-Circle D Ranch, which we
is
also
a
did not
whole
mention.
Another thing there. This is where essentially all of the working horses of Walt Disney World live.
Yes.
All the horses that go up and down Main Street, pulling the
Horse-drawn
horse-drawn-
carriages.
streetcars.
And now they pull Merida.
Yeah, they do all the different character
Anna.
cavalcades at both Magic Kingdom and Epcot. Back when they used to do parades at what was then Disney MGM Studios that had horses, this is where they would come from.
And the Headless Horseman would ride one of these horses, of
That's
course.
right.
And also, the tiny little white ponies would pull the Cinderella's castle float, or, for Disney weddings, they use that as well.
That's right. And of course, then there's also the hayride that they do right around Fort
Yes.
Wilderness, the horses that pull that along.
They did a fun Headless Horseman hayride.
That's right.
They were planning on bringing it back this year.
There was going to be the haunted story telling the story of the Headless
It
Horseman.
was super popular.
And Ichabod Crane and all that, and you'd kind of go around a little loop, and then eventually there would be a
Don't give anything away. No spoilers.
Okay. You could probably guess
It was
what
very
might
popular. And they were going to bring it back when we did a tour
happen. Oh, what?
of Fort Wilderness, and the new ranch wasn't open when we were there. So we actually went in the former, I guess that was the kennel.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
It smelled like it used to be the kennel, but that's where they were just kind of like temporarily housed. But yeah, they were talking about how it was going to be back this year, and we were all very excited, and then it did not happen.
Yeah.
So stay tuned, because maybe they'll bring that back next year.
Right. But the great thing about the Tri-Circle D Ranch is that it's a place to go where you could essentially, very relaxed, just enjoy kind of seeing how they keep the horses, how they feed them, how they where they live.
Yeah,
and,
they used to have the blacksmith shop that I don't know if it's still
where they would
working, but
make the horseshoes, and then of course they had pony rides
Yes.
for the kids.
Gio has been on many times with my mother.
Yeah, which are right there, and so even just being able to walk around and just seeing all of these horses and the little horses and the ponies and all of that.
Yeah, because
Awesome.
oftentimes, back in the day, Hoop-Dee-Doo, you would check in, but there would be a line,
Yeah.
and you would have to wait if you weren't at the first show.
That would be the perfect thing to do
Exactly.
while you're waiting.
You could explore all of the grounds.
Because it's right there.
And I think we've covered it all. There's beaches, which they eventually were like, hey, don't go in that water,
Honestly,
because
though,
there's amoebas.
Yeah. But honestly, that is a great way, a totally different way to get to the Magic Kingdom.
Oh,
if
yeah.
you ever want. You could park there, take the bus into Pioneer Hall, hop on the boat, and go over to Magic Kingdom.
We forgot one major
I'm sure we
historical
did. There's
item.
a lot more.
the train.
The
The
choo-choo
Fort
train.
Wilderness
Oh my gosh.
Railroad. the most
even have my
popular
little,
amongst Disney nerds ever, because
I have my Walt Disney's Railroad storybook right here, which has a whole chapter
of that.
on kind of what was essentially a failed project. It was a really good idea.
Yes.
Where they had
Florida
a little train.
Grasslands do not take too kindly to whatever those things are.
Right.
Railroad
So,
ties.
They built a train all through Fort Wilderness as a way, alternate transportation to get from...
Yeah, because they didn't have buses when they first opened.
Yeah.
It was just the train.
Yeah.
And you didn't have to be staying there to ride it. You could come from another place and ride it all day long if you had a ticket.
But the thing is, this train, because of it having to go a full loop all around Fort Wilderness, it was actually significantly longer than the train at Magic Kingdom.
Oh, yeah.
But the trains themselves were so much smaller.
Yeah, there was only 4 or 5 cars to ride in.
Yeah, there were 5 cars that I think it had a capacity of 90 people.
But the engine itself.
But the engines themselves, they held a lot less water and oil than the big steam locomotives
only enough for
at the
one
Magic
trip.
Kingdom. And so they needed to, constantly keep these things filled with water, but they weren't staffed by the serious engineers that they hire over at the Magic Kingdom. These were essentially college kids. And
they might have forgotten once or twice. You have to fill it up every time because they won't make it around if you don't have a full tank.
And there were many times when they ran out of water.
Yeah.
But in addition, they also did not properly secure the railroad ties to the I guess the rails to the ties, and they didn't make that properly, and so there were many derailments as well.
Yes, the track basically every time it curved, it wanted to go straight, and they kept popping out and not.
Because these are a very narrow gauge railroads compared to the other ones.
It was a Forney Type 2-4 2T engine.
Oh, you don't need to tell me that. I
don't know if I said that right because there was a lot of dashes and numbers involved, but
Any train enthusiast knows exactly what you're talking about when you say Type 2-4 2T.
Yeah. The other issue, I think, was that it was a lot of swampy area, so it kind of sunk in a little. And then in addition to that, pretty much where the bus drops you off, like the train went right by there, and people don't pay attention to things.
Yeah, and there's a lot of places where you could get a lot closer to the train, so it was a safety issue. Plus, every time it crossed the road, they had to toot the whistle. And if you're staying in a campground and you keep hearing these whistles over and over again, there were a lot of sound issues.
Yeah.
So initially, because they were hauling people after the Hoop-Dee-Doo shows, these trains would run pretty late.
Wow, that would be
and some people are trying to sleep
do at night.
Yeah. So eventually they cut the hours to only the daytime hours. But still, there were just a whole bunch of issues that led for it to eventually be shuttered, I think right around 77, but then it was off and on all the way up through 1980 when they pretty much said, all right, let's pull this thing.
We're calling it.
And they put these, the cars and the engines, they kind of took them backstage, threw some tarps over them, thinking that maybe someday we'll be able to do this right. But then, of course, the weather got to them. And
well, 2 of them became ticket booths at the old Pleasure Island. So if you were ever there and wondering, why is this a train?
Well, they're not there now.
But they're no longer there. But also, I believe the Carrollwood Pacific Society, or whatever that's called, rescued them. And
well, I know that one of the engines John Lasseter has in his backyard.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, a couple of the.
I think the Carrollwood Pacific
themselves.
people rescued 2 of them to restore. So, but you can also still see. I think there's only one place left now where you can see some railroad ties in the ground. The rest of them have been either reclaimed by nature or taken up by Disney.
A lot of them you can see where it was. You may not necessarily be able to see the railroad ties, but you can kind of kind of see where there's a little bit of a raised kind of a place for them to have gone through.
Yeah.
But still, that's just a very unique thing. Very fun type of transportation.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
All right. Well, I think we've covered it.
What are your overall thoughts, though, on Fort Wilderness?
Well, I opened with those, so you'll have to
Yeah.
rewind and listen. But I do love it. I hope it never goes away. It is a respite, especially for us being national park fans and frequent visitors. We don't really go to the Florida national parks that often. In fact, I don't think we've been to Everglades.
I've actually never been.
We will do it at some point.
I'm just a big fan of mountains
And
waterfalls,
tall trees.
waterfalls,
and, yes.
and that kind of thing. And they don't really have that.
But I do want to do more like state parks once they reopen and stuff. That'll be fun to see things because you just never know what you'll discover. Anyway, being locals that aren't staying on property, that is a place where we can just go down the street to and really just relax and get away from the hustle and bustle
Kind of just like
of life.
be enveloped in nature, but very close to our home.
Yeah. Like I said, it's our go-to place for most birthday celebrations. We will be at Trail's End. So, yes. I love it. I love the history of it, and I hope everyone listening did as well.
Yeah, it's a good way to just spend a very relaxing day.
Or week or two.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, we didn't really talk about the cabins because, they're cabins. We'll talk about that if we do hotels some other time, but we've stayed there. We like them. They're fun.
Yeah, they are fun.
It's a fun way if you don't have an RV or you don't want to be in a tent.
I think I would probably prefer an RV and then do one of the what do you call them, the cabins, over pitching the tent.
Yes.
Yeah.
Unless they invent air-conditioned tents.
Which they probably have.
We do have a little bit of business to get to.
Oh, my.
I don't remember if it was the podcast or the live show, but at some point I talked about giving away this little Big Al wishable.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
And we had some entries for that, which were to subscribe to our YouTube channel. If you're not already, you're missing out on watching this episode. So give us a subscribe over there.
Please do, or a comment.
Yeah, and then they just had to email in and tell us their favorite episode. But that's another good way. If you don't want to email, you can always comment on the YouTube video, and then we'll be able to talk to you that way. Or you can talk to us on Facebook. Doesn't matter. Whatever works for you. We'd love to hear from you. Anyway, we did a random drawing.
That's right. And we actually found a winner.
We did, and it was...
Who was the winner?
Jimmy, or as he's known on Instagram, Tinkerbear82.
Oh, that's very appropriate.
I know. He's going to get a bear. So
Yay.
Thank you for listening, Jimmy, and we do appreciate you being a devoted listener.
Yay.
And hopefully this little guy will make your day.
Yeah, I think the trivia last week was essentially what was your favorite episode.
Yes.
So I don't really have an answer for that. I mean, I have my favorites, but...
We already gave that answer.
But I do have another trivia question for this week.
All right. I will contact you on Instagram, Jimmy, and get
right.
your info to mail this out to you as well, if you're listening. I'll probably contact you before you get this notice. Well, maybe I'll wait till tomorrow when this comes out.
So anyway, the trivia question goes back to the Hoop-Dee-Doo musical review that we talked about. It actually holds a record, a Guinness record.
It does.
But what is that record for?
Well, I'll tell you.
Wait, if you tell me, that's the answer.
Oh, okay. I won't tell you.
You can tell me next week.
All right.
Because that'll when we reveal the answer. But that's a trivia question for you.
Yes. So you can email us at Zanna@Zannaland.com. Not setting up the Waterfall email. It's just easier to spell that way. Or you can comment on Facebook when I post the show. You can comment on YouTube when we post the video there.
Twitter,
Instagram,
all of it.
Anywhere you want, we will accept your answers.
You can even just say it out loud. But
Well,
you should.
We won't hear it if you do that, unless you're calling and happen to know our phone numbers. Yeah, so that brings us to the end of this Fort Wilderness episode.
I do love it.
And we didn't even talk about cornbread.
I did mention it.
They do have good cornbread that you can get at
both.
Trails End or Hoop-Dee-Doo.
Yeah.
All right. So let us know what you think of Fort Wilderness, and like, subscribe, tell your friends. We thank you for listening. We would love it if you share this and let people know that you're listening to this podcast and enjoy it.
Indeed.
And we will see you Thursday for the live show.
That's right.
At 8 p.m. on YouTube and Facebook. Take your pick, whichever you prefer.
Or do both.
Yes. And thank you as always for joining us up the waterfall.
That's right. Bye now.